Hi, good afternoon. It is Tuesday, April, I can't even tell, 16th. Clearly I barely know the date. Today we are going to be talking about autism. April is Autism Awareness Month, and it's a little bit near and dear to me. But I'm going to bring a little bit of my personal story and a little bit of my professional experience and merge the two. This uh, is geared towards business owners and leaders and managers, but it's really relevant to everyone who has a job. So if you're here, buckle up, let's do this. First of all, many of you know I'm a single mother and a business owner, and I do a lot of things. And I'm very proud of my accomplishments as a mom and as a professional and as a human being. But one of the biggest challenges in my life is my teenage daughter, who is now 16 and is autistic. We spent many years knowing something was wrong, not getting the right diagnosis, and that really kind of created a lack of understanding. And I didn't realize how big that lack of understanding was until I got the diagnosis for her. I'd asked the school, they'd done evaluations, and it didn't seem to click. When I finally took her to Kennedy Krieger, which is a very reputable place for diagnosis and treatment of issues like autism. They did a great job, and they were like, I can't believe they missed it. This is crazy. But then they also pointed out behaviors that I hadn't even recognized or picked up on as autistic. They were just hard to live with sometimes. So translating that into the work environment is pretty interesting. You might have coworkers that you find are difficult or awkward, say the wrong things, really rigid about something, always correcting something, getting anxious, pacing, tapping, and they may be perfectly neurotypical or they might be disabled. And the thing about a disability in the workplace is you're not supposed to go around and be like, hey, this person has a disability. The company is required to accommodate disabilities that they're notified of and make reasonable accommodations. And there are some accommodations requested that are unreasonable. But in the case of autism, there's a very broad spectrum. My daughter is very high functioning and very intelligent, but she misses social cues. She thinks certain jokes are funny that are really not. Um, or it's not that they're not funny, that they're just really inappropriate sometimes. And she will sometimes hammer down on that point too, not realizing that it's good to just let it go. Um, and, you know, there can be days where it's just hard for her to get up and do life. She's anxious about things. If the pants she was planning on wearing gets a stain on them, that could derail her entire morning. If her team at school wants to dress up for the day and they give her notice the day before and she can't wrap her brain around what she's going to wear, she gets very anxious and upset. And this might not affect a common person. When you have 7 pairs of sweatpants and one gets a stain, most people would just be like, oh, let me put on the next pair. They look almost exactly the same. But for her, this can be a struggle. And so you translate that into the work environment. And it could be, but I was sitting at that desk and I was using that chair. And, I can't sit over here and do this thing in this chair, and, there's qualities that anyone might have, whether they're autistic or not. And, as a company, understanding that people come with a lot of differences, and autism might not be the reason that they're different, but autism is one of those things where so many people have it that are not really like visibly obvious. I think most people know within a short time of meeting my daughter that something's different, but they don't know exactly what, unless they're really familiar with autism. I mean, I knew she probably was autistic, and it wasn't until she was diagnosed that I learned that there's a lot more to it than what I understood. When she would get mad at me for being in the main living room and she wanted the lights off, music on, and she would walk in circles. I didn't realize that was sort of a form of repetitive behavior, stimming, whatever, something that soothes her. And, you know, I used to be like, oh, I just want to get in the kitchen. I need to get something. And I'd get frustrated. Now I understand and I try to tread a little more lightly. And, in the workplace, you can't go that far with it. You can't make everyone sit in the dark while you blast music and walk in circles. But you can certainly find yourself in situations where you're masking. Masking is where you're trying to act like you're fine, but then it kind of overwhelms you. And you might need a break. In middle school, before she was diagnosed, she was prone to running into the bathroom, and she just needed isolation. She needed alone, and the nurse's office wasn't alone. But the middle school was very rigid about that, and their response to it wasn't to say what's wrong and how can we help her. It was to punish her. And so, translating that to the work environment, the response that a manager, team member, or leader of a company might have to somebody kind of acting up is to punish them, and or to sort of say, hey, you can't do this behavior or that behavior. And there's a lot of undiagnosed people with autism, so you're not required to provide reasonable accommodations to somebody who hasn't presented with a disability that that you've been made aware of. But as part of the broader spectrum, not just is it discriminatory treatment and do I have to provide this legally, there's a broader spectrum of inclusion and diversity. And diversity doesn't just mean your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. It can mean just your life experiences and what brings you to the table. There's so many things, building blocks, and people are not always what they seem. Or, you can't judge that book by its cover. But that inclusion and diversity piece, includes all the obvious things, but it includes a lot of not so obvious things. And this is why, you're not, as a company, you're not supposed to terminate someone just because they're a difficult person to work with. But, companies are entitled to with documented complaints and things like that. I mean, they're entitled to without documented complaints, but they may face lawsuits. So those are the kinds of things that when you're, let's say you have a group of 10 people who all work in the same general area, and one of them is getting agitated and frustrated and needs this particular chair and needs to sit in this particular spot, and maybe they can't stand people chewing and, all these different things. How do you, as an employer, accommodate that? And I think that, reasonable accommodations are, this desk is assigned. Everyone else can free float if that's the way the office runs, but this desk here is assigned, and this seat here labeled. And, there can be things like, I understand that they need to take breaks and go decompress. I understand that they might be in a little bit late, but they're going to, find a way to make up for it. There's things like that. And even if you don't know the diagnosis, just giving room to people who need room, because I guarantee you they'll be more productive and incredibly grateful and stay longer with companies that provide that. But it also, from the leadership down, it sets a tone with the team. We understand this person, they just need things the way they need them, and we respect it. We're setting the tone that we're protecting their needs, by protecting those things that might, alarm them or upset them. And interestingly enough, with a lot of autistic people, they need very direct feedback. You can't be glossy. You can't say, it would be nice if you did blah, blah, blah. You sometimes have to say, it's inappropriate when you say this. Here's a better way to say it. Things like that. So they need very direct. They can't pick up on, what you're hinting at. And, so part of building a positive team environment is sort of showing your own acceptance and understanding of differences and finding ways to communicate with different people who have different needs. Now, if you know someone is autistic, you can really talk to them about, what accommodations would support you and, within reason. It's not like you can say, we have this, 3,000 square foot space, but nobody can work there but the autistic person because they can't stand being around people. That's not going to work. Um, you know, it might be that you let them work from home, or if it's even possible, or provide a room that they can go into and have quiet time and work in there, or have a sort of exclusive, have a set aside space. Or maybe they're allowed to come in really early where no one else is there and they can get some of their work done at that time. And then that way it's reducing the amount of exposure that they're having. So, the thing that I look at, my daughter is obviously still in school, and school has, the same requirements of non-discrimination, and there is a goal for inclusion and diversity. Um, but unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way, and it's a it, school's an incredibly rigid environment, and if you equate that to companies who are like, you must be here from this time to this time, you must attend every meeting in person, you must do this, you must do that. You might just think people have a big case of the don't want us, and that's not true with everyone. My daughter very much wants to be successful, and at least one morning a week, she has to go in late because she's just anxious, or she had insomnia severely the night before, and she doesn't always adjust well. There's a anxiety going on, and especially in her teenage years, you add hormones into that and all the things, and it's been a little bit of a roller coaster for her, to be honest. So then she goes to school and somebody's kind of giving her crap because she was there late. They don't want to have to help her out. um, and that's hard. As a parent, that's hard. But one day she's going to be an adult. She's going to be, working in some environment. And I try to imagine, what is that environment going to be, and who's going to be accepting of her, and you know, how can she be successful in her ways? And I still don't know quite what that looks like, but I know it won't be a rigid environment. And people do choose their career paths or fall into career paths based on what fits them best. And I truly believe she will find her way there. And she's very, very intelligent. In fact, that's another problem. She's extraordinarily intelligent, but the sort of rigidity and I equate school to having 8 different bosses giving you 5 different assignments a week. So now you've got 40 assignments a week, and you're juggling them this way and that way, and she can barely stay focused on the class. She might get overwhelmed by someone breathing next to her, and all these things are happening. And it's a lot for anybody. I think high school, looking at it now as an adult, and probably one of the hardest times. I mean, she's also a 2-sport athlete, and she volunteers as a football manager in the fall. So she's really on a schedule that's pretty, daunting for anybody. And then you add in how hard she has to work just to be normal in a space with all these people. And it's a lot. But she really pushes herself. She goes for the honors classes and the AP classes because she is so bright. And then she struggles, and she doesn't get as good a grades as other people because she doesn't she doesn't want to dumb herself down, even though it stresses her out. And I think that a lot of people who are autistic are incredibly bright, and if they can tap into that and support that, they're going to get really, really amazing input. And she has some teachers who are incredibly supportive of that and bring out the best in her. She has teachers who, when she has the free period, it's like a 30-minute free period, she goes and works in their class, not because she's doing their classwork, but because they make her feel comfortable there. And that's huge. don't you want to be that kind of employer? Don't you want to have that kind of team? Don't you want to work alongside people that you just get each other and you know that you're going to be there for each other and give each other space when each other needs it? Those are the kinds of things that I imagine as we grow and build knowledge and understanding of each other, we can have better teams for it, that each person brings their own unique drive to the table. Maybe she's a little bit inappropriate sometimes, but maybe she's going to cut straight to the point and reflect back excellent feedback on how to improve something because she's willing to look at it critically. You know, um, there's so many things that get sort of undervalued. And, obviously I'm focusing this particular podcast on autism, but you can really equate that to anything that anyone brings to the table of any, um, protected class, any disability, any race, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, familial status. That's my crock pot. I'm working from home today. It's pretty loud. Um, so, you know, when I look at sort of the whole picture of what an employer can do, it really starts with setting the tone. That's number one, that's key. The leaders have to embrace differences. You have to accept that someone might have a different style of approaching something, a different communication style, different, series of habits and needs, and that's okay. You want those people on your team. They're going to look at things differently. They're going to ask different questions. That's amazing, but there might be a little fallout from that too. And you have to then create understanding and show compassion. And, if somebody's having a difficult time with somebody else who's autistic or who has some other disability or difference that they're not really like understanding, you can sort of help counsel them on that and develop awareness through discussion, through, providing information. I wish I knew as much as I did about autism for my own daughter. I wasn't even accommodating enough. I've done things since to really help out. I make sure she always has headphones when we go places. I make sure that she has a room that has blinds she can pull down. She just shut herself out. And, we have speakers that play white noise in her room all the time. These are just the kinds of things that, I had to learn a little bit the hard way what her needs were and how to accommodate them. So, as an employer, you're looking at those things. How do we accommodate differences? Do we accept the way someone speaks if they come from a background that speaks differently, has an accent, whatever? I think that we just have to be comfortable in that place. We have to learn to embrace each other as we are so that people can go to work and be themselves and be comfortable. Because I think if they can do that, they're going to be way more productive, way more happy, and you're going to retain people. But that training aspect is so important. Power 3 is building our training on our up and coming website, which is going to be launched very soon. And right now we just have sort of some baseline trainings that include non-discrimination and diversity and inclusion awareness. But, it can go so much further than that. It can become a part of your culture to build awareness. It can become a part of your culture to provide information and show each person that flexibility. Maybe you have someone who is completely neurotypical, but they have frustrations working around the person who's disabled. Providing them with support is okay. I need support from my own daughter sometimes, just as she needs support from me sometimes. So, I think that it's just recognizing all of the differences, finding a way to carve a path forward with compassion and understanding, and really investing in your team and their needs and building awareness, embracing every different type of person, and maybe even applauding things that make them unique, even if it's different and even if it's difficult sometimes. I wish more people did that in everyday life. I wish the public school did it better. I don't think that there's a lot of training that goes on there. And, One of the things that I think about a lot, I'm a business owner. If you're a business owner and you have managers who are responsible for people, and those managers are not informed and aware and trained on how to handle situations like that, you could be the most understanding leader on the planet, but if your manager isn't, they could wind up giving you a lawsuit over that. Making sure that the people who are there to protect and manage your employees have the training and awareness to handle things effectively and not say the wrong things. Here's a great story, so making sure I'm not going too far over time. My daughter played basketball this past season, and partway through the season, they played a team that wasn't great. And afterwards, the coach kind of commented and said, "Yeah, I mean, I knew we were going to win. The coach told me they had like half the team was autistic." And, my daughter was like, "Wait, I'm autistic. What are you trying to say?" And, she kind of laughed about it at the time, and everyone kind of laughed about it at the time. But it was just an off the cuff remark that, was pretty upsetting. And, it's one of those things where, you don't want your manager, I know the school wouldn't want him saying that, but there he was as the coach of a high school program, making sort of somewhat, degrading remarks about people with autism in front of my daughter at autism. Props to him for not noticing that she was different, but I don't really know how he wouldn't have noticed, but who knows what he was thinking. But that's the problem. You don't know. But I don't think he'd been trained. I don't think that they train their coaches. They barely pay them. We give a certain amount of grace and forgiveness for that. But another family would have been on the warpath and tried to have his job taken. Certainly, it's not a situation I want my daughter to be in now or in the future. So, that awareness and that training that goes into building that awareness is critical, because each person who's in charge of anything in your company is a representative of your brand and your values. So, if that's something you want to pursue, definitely check it out with us at Power 3, and we can definitely support you. We have our online courses that'll be launched in the next couple of weeks, but we also would happily do in-person talks and conversations. I would give anything to go into the high school and be able to tell people what I wish they knew about my daughter. I'm talking about all the issues that she has as being autistic, but I wish people knew how big her heart is. I wish people knew that she literally gives the best hugs. I wish people knew that she's funny as shit, really. I wish people knew that she will give the shirt off her back. She is so sweet, so kind. I used to give her Hershey Kisses in her lunchbox in preschool, and she would just hand one out to each friend and then look down and realize she didn't have any left. The teacher used to keep a bag in her desk just to save her from herself. So she's just the kindest, sweetest soul. Very caring, very giving. She's a teenager, so we're gonna add that layer in. It's a little different. We get some attitude now, but she really does mean well, and she's a force to be reckoned with. She's incredible, and she's so bright. But I wish people knew that she knows when they're looking at her funny. She knows when they're avoiding her. She can see them turn their shoulder. She can see them roll their eyes. She's not stupid. She just is a little awkward, a little different. And, little things like that really do hurt, and you don't want that kind of office environment for anybody. And some people might have differences that you can put a label on, and some people won't. But the important thing is that as an employer, you're constantly looking at how can we learn about each other, accept each other, and optimize our working relationships with each other. And that's sort of my lesson today in a more sort of general overview. We can probably do some future ones where we get a little bit more into the law, and that would be excited to do that because I think it's kind of interesting. And, for people who have suffered discrimination, you absolutely should be reaching out to the EEOC. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You can file complaints, but I always recommend the first thing you do is you talk to your employer. a lot of employers have better values than sometimes what is conveyed on a day-to-day basis. And they'll want to know and they'll want to correct things. But, at the end of the day, people who have differences and disabilities really do need to be protected. And it is an everyday thing. It's an everyday thing that someone rejects my daughter, literally every day. I don't know how it's going to go when she's an adult. But as an employer, you have to be aware that these things don't really change that much. I see adults reject her. I see adults react weird, laugh about something. It happens. So, I imagine that, the future of employment is just learning how to coexist and understand each other better. And, there's been a huge uptick in filings for discrimination, for harassment. So I think it's something like a 20-some% increase from 2022 to 2023 of claims filed with the EEOC. I know in 2023 they had $665 million worth of fees paid by employers who lost discrimination complaints. So the world is getting educated and they're wanting better. And, I want my daughter to want better. And, so I think employers who aren't paying attention to this topic really should be. It's important. It can be costly if you don't, but also it's the right thing to do. So anyhow, I'm going to leave you on that note. Do the right thing, get the training, build the awareness, lead by example, and really just try to embrace all the differences because they are amazing and they will build your team. Take care.